Hello and welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay, and today is the second programme in our series about the Enneagram. And there's four of us gathered together, and we have Grahame Morgan Watson. Hi, Grahame. Judith Priest. Hi, Judith. Lynne Citroen-Barratt.
Hi.
And of course, I'm Iain McNay. And we're going to talk about a specific type in the Enneagram, type 6. So before we start that, though, Grahame is going to tell us just briefly what the Enneagram is.
Okay, the Enneagram as a symbol is about, just shows the 9 points. The word is Ennea, 9 gram points. The Enneagram of personality types, which is what we're discussing today, is a way of utilising that symbol, that kind of map, and putting certain behavioural structures, motivational structures, about human nature. And I guess most of us will have seen how different people act in different ways, and in some ways we see people act similarly to someone else and we think, gosh, that's like so-and-so, it's like my friend, like my mother. So the Enneagram of personality types has been structured as a way of mapping these kind of clusters of behavior, clusters of traits. There's many kind of psychometric tests out there that test things like traits, like are you proactive, reactive, are you kind of introvert, extrovert. And no personality structure is that one thing, but a cluster of that and many, many, many others. It's still only a map, it's still only a way of helping us to see the kind of habitual patterns that we get ourselves into, the sort of psychological movement, emotional patterns. The purpose of that, of course, is to help us see some of the things that get us into stuck places, the things that get in the way of us really kind of showing up and becoming something a little bit of a truer nature, something of our real essence, our soul, if you like. So it's also can be seen a way of the way in which the ego structure, an aspect of the personality that has formed through growing up, through the kind of formative years, has taken on a certain way of seeing life, a way of taking certain aspects, interpreting, if you like, what we see, and thinking, oh, well, that must be that because it links in with how I've kind of seen my world and taken myself to be. The whole point of doing that, of course, is to kind of uncover, get rid of all that, not sort of totally, it'll never go completely, but to see through that and see something of our true nature, something of what is really, really us here as the soul.
So without all the conditioning on top.
Without the conditioning, without the kind of the fears and the things that get in the way, the activity, the things we think we have to do, must do, should do, all that stuff. What is that structure? And so the Enneagram provides us with these 9 basic kind of domains, these 9 types, if you like, which actually are within us all. We really will see all the 9 aspects of the Enneagram of personality types within us. We will see the type 3 within us, type 4 in us.
So there's 9 different types, and we are all primary one type, but we all have parts of the other types in us as well.
There's kind of, the more we become identified with the ego structure, it takes on a certain dominance, if you like, which means that we only stay in that. As we kind of get loose from that, all those other aspects of all the other types, the higher qualities, if you like, become more accessible to us. And we will experience, the slightly less unpleasant of the other kind of types as well, which is why you have that symbol with the lines, but I know we're not going to talk about that necessarily. But there's ways in which we connect through to some of the other types specifically under stress or in certain other conditions. But yes, we have the 9 types, but there's one of them which, if we look closely enough, will have a bit more of a charge to it. So we're going to be discussing today one type.
I must be honest with you, when I first discovered I was a type 6, it was a bit more than a bit of a charge. I was reading something and I thought, this person who wrote this really knows me. It was like it really hit home.
Yeah.
But before we get on to that, Judith, why don't you tell us what the kind of clues are to find out if we are a type 6?
Okay, so in the development of the young 6, very young usually, has been some experience of a lack of holding, of a lack of support. And that has impacted that child at a very deep level, so that with this feeling of the world is not supporting me in some way, they begin to feel very fearful.
So when you say lack of support, what would be a practical example of that?
A practical example may be that physically that life was actually a challenge to them. They may have been physically very ill, say. Okay. It may be that their parents were rather inconsistent in their parenting. It might be that in some way they began to interpret repeated behaviours or experiences in their life as, okay, the world is now becoming and feeling to me like a dangerous and uncertain place. And so as that child begins to experience the world as an uncertain and dangerous place, they begin to see and perceive that their whole worldview becomes the world is a dangerous and a risky place in which I need to be anxious and frightened about that, and begin to be wary and cautious and plan ahead and look for how I can, if you like, ensure myself before whatever it is I'm frightened of is going to get me. A very nice little story that actually Tom Condon, who is a teacher of the Enneagram, gives is that 6s are very like zebras. And zebras out in the plains of the Serengeti, are in actual danger of being eaten by a lion. And they approach actually very close. They intentionally get quite close to the lion, so the lions are within their sight. And they do that because if they run away too far from the lions, then they don't know where they are. They might creep up behind me and, take a chunk out of my buttock. If they're too close to them, now we're really in danger of being eaten. So they keep them within their sight, and that's very descriptive of a whole 6's way of being is, let me just be close enough to what it is that is out there that's frightening me, so that I'm always prepared. I can always be prepared for what I might need to do. I'm ahead of the game.
Okay, so that's a good clue. So someone's always prepared, always ahead of the game.
Yeah.
They're a bit nervous from what you're saying.
There's a variety of styles within 6. 6 is one of the problematic types in some ways to get a grip on, because they have a wide range of manifestation of their behaviour. Some 6s are more phobic, they're more frightened, they withdraw, they feel frightened, they know they're frightened, they're very doubtful and uncertain, and they move away from things. Other 6s are kind of going against that fear. They want to, in some way, deny it in themselves and meet it head on, so they can become quite risk-taking, quite rebellious, and to try and prove to themselves that kind of a muscling up against this deep inner fear and anxiety that's inside.
Okay. So one of the books I really like, which is a very basic book, is The Enneagram Made Easy. And I actually listed a few points last night, just so viewers can get as wide a feel as possible on type 6. And plagued by doubt, which is something that I know for myself sometimes. Always alert to danger, which you recognise there. Take things too seriously. Very hard workers. So there's a kind of there's different things you could take as a quality. In fact, loyal and supportive. Good sense of humour. They take things too seriously, but they also have a good sense of humour. Support people through thick and thin. They either procrastinate or plunge in headlong, which is what, again, you've alluded to there. Exhaust themselves by worrying. They overreact when stressed. And I think all of those also, as a type 6, I can identify with. I'm not necessarily always overwhelmed by these things. Maybe I was certainly in the past by some of them, but they're all things I can recognise in me at times. Anyway, Lynne, you're also a type 6. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder, when you first found out you were a type 6, how was that for you? Was it a relief, or did you feel insulted, or...?
Well, unlike you, Ian, I doubted it because doubt
okay.
is what I do.
Okay.
I wouldn't believe that I was. It doesn't look like any fun to me.
So did you go to a seminar to start
I
with?
went to
or?
a seminar and I sat as they went round and they explained what all the different points were, and everybody, by the end of the day, everybody knew what they were except for me.
So you were sitting there on your own,
I could not-
procrastinating and doubting.
Procrastinating, yes, fearful. I don't fit into any of them.
And,
And then the group leader, who was Eli Jackson-Bear, said to me, "You're a 6."
because you
And I
were
didn't believe it.
right, but you were actually displaying
I
6
was.
traits, weren't
Absolutely,
you? Yeah.
absolutely.
And then has it kind of? Do you find has it helped you to understand that you're a 6? Has it helped you know more about yourself, understand yourself better?
Yes, yes. When you invited me to come here, I thought, great. So, as you just described, no fear, just meet it on. Yes, I've never done anything like that. I'm coming.
Yes.
Then last night, it's who will be there? What will they be like? What will I wear? Where will I sit? Will I sit next to Iain? Will I sit on the other sofa? Which side of the camera, on, and just whizzing, and then I caught it. And then I laugh, and then I relax. So otherwise I might still be spinning.
So you realised that the 6 in you was something that at another level you had some control over.
Yes,
'Cause you could
I don't
watch it.
have to do that anymore. So it's been really helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to you, Grahame. So I'll ask you a similar question. So when you first found out who you were in terms of when you first found out you were essentially a type 6, how did that alter the way you saw life?
Specifically, I think it was. I came to the decision of the 6 through a process that was initially around looking at the centres. Where do you spend most of your time? Are you what are you kind of mostly preoccupied with? And for me, I was, we'd had some teaching about the aspects of the different types. And I just thought, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, well, where do I spend my time? Where do I spend my time? Oh gosh, where do I spend my, and it's kind of like, ding, light goes on, I'm up here, spending my time in my head. So I knew I was somewhere in the head side, and I wasn't sure between 5 and 6. Some of the aspects that came out when I then sort of decided, yeah, this I can recognise. I don't think it necessarily changed my life in a great way at that point, because there was other training that I was undergoing, but it became a constant thread. It was really on a full retreat training, on the teacher training, that I began to see more and more of how this structure kind of gets in the way. So what it did is it started the process of awakening, which is for all people, that for all human condition, it's that awakening moment. And one of the things that I think I've realised mostly with 6s is that they kind of, like with 2 of the other types in the sort of triangle, tend to be more revolutionary. We kind of get it. Doesn't mean to say it means that we've got it and got it all sorted out, but to get the structure and understand it and start to see it. But of course, it's still very much a head thing. So the analytical side, what became more important was to catch myself in the act of seeing that, to seeing how I'm thinking about the thinking about the thinking, and the overthinking structure. So it was catching myself in the act of that. Over the years, it's made a huge difference to me.
Yeah. And you, Judith, how's it helped you?
Well, those who accompanied me on my journey with the Enneagram will be laughing heartily now, because my journey to finding out I was a 6 was a very long and tortuous one. In the end, they named me a 10. As a joke, it wasn't very funny. Because I'm a 6, and because 6s actually have great imagination, when I came to the Enneagram, I really could imagine myself in very many places, and I could find all of those in me. There were certain types I just knew I wasn't, but I was left with quite a few that I thought I was, and there is a similarity of behaviour. And in the end, I kind of got back down to 9 and 6. And I worked for a very long time on myself as a 9, and it was really, really valuable work. And I spent a long time trying to work out where I was. There's a line between 9 and 6 in that dynamic, and which was my home ground. I began to see, of course, that my whole process in terms of that journey and that questioning and that self-doubt, and every time I thought I'd landed with one, I'd then pick it to pieces, was 6 at work. I never felt secure and a sense of rightness of where I'd landed. As all that work with the Enneagram really began to help me stand outside myself, to observe my process, to observe my type at work, and then begin to really, in very subtle, first of all, gross level, if you like, and then in subtle ways of how that was at work within me, and be able to then get a flavour of, okay, look, this is happening again. So this is something you need to relax. This is where you're at it again. You know, this is where you keep banging your nose against the same wall. So how about not doing that, because it hurts?
Okay. I know for me, when I first found out I was a 6, it's actually incredible relief, because I thought, well, okay, there's nine different types. Well, a ninth of the population must essentially think in a similar way to me a lot of the time. I thought that's really good to know. And I know when I was a child, I would be puzzled that I would feel so strongly about something, whether it's positive or negative, and other people seem to be so indifferent to a situation or a feeling or an event. And so when I had that information that I was classifiable, if you like, broadly classifiable, it was just this relief. And I started to understand myself a lot better. And I started to have, ironically, more compassion for myself, because I thought, well, yes, that's why I feel that or react that in that situation, because that is my essential personality type, and there's reasons for that. And the other side of it was equally important for me, was I became very interested in the Enneagram, and I got lots of other books. So I've bought some of them here, and I started to look at other types, and I could, especially in my place of work, my world of business, I played the game of, if I didn't get on with somebody, I found them difficult, I'd look through one of the books and see if I could spot their type. And I may not have got their type right, but it was really helpful, because I'd find the main characteristics that I had hard, or what I saw in the person, and then I could work out how a 6 would not react, but relate to that. And that was a big doorway that opened. So practically it's been a big impact on my life. And I still play the game, and my wife Renata and I often play the game. We met someone, wonder what number they are, what type they are. We may not get it right, but it doesn't matter, because we're exploring that person more, how we feel, how we understand them, and not just as a separate person, but our relationship with that person.
I think for a 6, particularly, it helps us make sense of the world and other people, and give us a little control back. If we can feel like we can understand ourselves better and can understand other people better, we're less intimidated, less fearful. We can manage better in the world. That's my experience.
I mean, the interesting thing is the biggest impact for me of learning about the Enneagram itself was more about that understanding others, understanding certain situations that my mother-in-law had been through, seeing certain kind of movements, understanding my own children. My own sort of experience of this 6 quality, if you like, is a desire to understand, to know, that looking out for guidance, that looking for the answer, having the books and the self-help books, maybe this book's got the answer. That's kind of the movement of 6ness, which of course is part of the thing that gets us into trouble, is always looking outside of myself. The biggest other part of the whole journey for me in using the Enneagram, of working with the Enneagram, has been putting myself back in touch with my own instinctual centre, my own being, the physical part. I mean, my wife and I completed a 4-year training in Feldenkrais movement. I did it not to become necessarily to go out there teaching or using Feldenkrais, but it was actually because I realised the disconnection for myself with the physical being, which is one of the things, the qualities of sixness, is this kind of walking around just up here.
Absolutely.
And the one of the things that sayings that you hear people say, oh, he wears his heart on his sleeve. Now, I probably in my own mind thought that I was pretty well controlled, that, you know, I was holding my emotion. Absolute rubbish. Everyone could see the coloration, physiological changes, that I was either worried, nervous, that comes out in certain ways, hair movements, whatever. So getting in touch with that is one of the biggest kind of shifts for me, and certainly one of the recommendations I would say for anyone in the six who sees this is, how do we come back into this physical being,
into
just
our
to be here,
bodies.
to be present, to become here, instead of thinking about what's going to happen next.
Yeah. So how is this for you, Lynne, to come back into your body
Well,
as a type 6?
when I read about the type 6 being very mental, I go, yes, that's where I live. Not being very emotional, that's not true. I'm very emotional, but I don't live in my body. It's a tremendous effort for me to get into my body, to do yoga and to breathe, just breathing. It's really hard work for me. And it's only in the last few years that I've started to exercise, because, you know, we have to as we get older.
I think, and that's, I mean, I find even now, I mean, I enjoy doing the Feldenkrais awareness through movement lessons. But I notice there's always there's a real reluctance to really do it. There's a part of me which rather they say, well, you know, really, I don't want to bother with that. I'll just go and read a book or something, or even go for a walk, which is good physical.
Yep.
But to actually bring the attention into the physical being, into the movement, the functioning, that is the work, in a way. One of the qualities of the work is really to be there. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because something I often, even now, notice after 5 years.
How do you all find this fear and courage? Because there's the fear on one side, and the potential of a 6 is to have courage. How do you find that has practically impacted your life?
Well, when I remember doing the first inquiry or an exercise around courage, and actually my whole body having a reaction to that, is because there was an inner knowing that all my life I had been fundamentally courageous and frightened at the same time, and that those had been in tension inside me. One of the things that a 6 has tension around is authority, that they place it outside themselves, and they give away their own authority, they give away their own power, they give away their own strength, and they place it out there. And I began to see that, well, in fact, I didn't begin to see, I just knew that that's what I'd done, and that's what I was doing, and that really to be walking a path of courage was to begin to take all of that back and actually own who I was all the time, the part that I was disowning, because there is an aspect of being a 6 where you disown your own power. It's kind of, it feels a bit like, okay, I might be too powerful, I might be too forceful, there might be too much in here, in some sense, and so I'll push it out there where I can kind of give it to somebody else. And then I'm kind of in tension with that. And so the whole journey of courage is courage to be, and Tillich's words. So that courage to actually really fully be who I already was, and to find that.
And how did you find that difficult, or did you?
Oh yes,
yeah,
tremendously. And I'd had enormously challenging experiences in my life, which had seriously, profoundly challenged my courage, and those were transforming experiences. I went to, if you like, to the bottom of really at the bottom of what lies at 6, and that's because life brought that to me, and it was only right at the bottom that I found that courage was actually there.
So it was there, but you had to get like almost the bottom till
I
you
had to
found...
get to the bottom to
Yeah.
find that actually what was at the bottom was me. It wasn't somebody outside, it wasn't my husband, it wasn't my family, it wasn't even God. I decided that God had deserted me. And that, so in that depth, I found that actually there was me. And that's where I located, if you like, that me had enough.
So it was there, but it was hidden. And,
It had
and
been
you
hidden,
got there in the end.
or
yeah.
I'd hidden it.
Yeah. what about you, Grahame? How are you with this fear
fear
and
and
courage
courage.
axis? Yeah.
One of the ways that I recognised when I first heard it talked about, and it may help your viewers to recognise this, is there's an underlying sense that I might be told off. That somehow or other I have to be careful because I may have done something that someone could reprimand me for. It's slightly different from just being good or evil. It's just like, have I got am I responsible for something? That would be the kind of fear part. The courage that I experience more and more now is this trusting in myself, trusting in my own being, which comes from the presence of just being in this moment. In other words, instead of thinking of that future part, instead of thinking that, have I checked everything, have I got the sat-nav coming up here today, have I thought about what I'm going to say, which would be a very typical sort of six...
But do you trust your sat-nav? This is the question.
No. But
Exactly, I don't trust mine either.
But I
I always
did-
double
it-
check
you know, but it-
I look at the map, is it taking the right direction?
And MapQuest. Three things.
So, I mean, I think the thing is it's becoming more aligned to this moment. That actually, when I'm just here, and that's being in the physical and sensing into my physical reality of now, and realizing, actually, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. For the next second, I really don't know what's going to happen. And actually seeing that as the thing to trust. That actually, I can never know what's going to happen. If I actually get out of my way, things pretty well turn out quite well. And that's the courage part, because that can be very frightening, is to say, actually, if I don't have a plan, if I don't have a strategy, if I really don't know what I'm going to walk into, that's the stepping off into the unknown, which is the courage that from the kind of dominant six feels very much at the core, the root of the sort of basic fear.
And you, do you have a story for us on fear and courage, or a feeling, or...
All I can think is it's becoming more confusing to me, because as I get older, there are new fears that come with getting older, and there's more courage that comes with getting older.
Because the body doesn't do what it used to do, does it?
Body doesn't, no, and it doesn't want to be uncomfortable
Yeah.
or to be pushed too much. Nervous system doesn't want to be pushed too much. I've done
Yeah.
that. I don't need to go there.
Yeah.
It's becoming a more wavy line.
Yeah.
It moves differently.
It's just reminding me of, we were discussing earlier some examples of famous number sixes, again, to maybe give people a context. And some I'd written down beforehand from books, and then there's two recommendations from you guys. We got Robert Kennedy, Bruce Springsteen, he's born to run, but I guess he's running in the right direction. Mel Gibson, which is maybe fairly obvious. Richard Nixon, that was a surprise to me. Diane Keaton, and then one of you said Woody Allen. That's almost like typifies a neurosis, let's say, of a number six. And Tom Hanks. So there are examples of famous people that probably people have heard of.
I think the Woody Allen films are particularly bring out the humour side of the six. Six is very, a lot of comedians in there, and then those, if you can start to make fun of it.
Yeah.
I mean, often people in relationships say, I'm married to a six, I've got a six mother, how do you deal with them? Actually, humour is a great way of diffusing a situation.
With Woody Allen, I also read recently that he likes to work within a small budget on his films. They're always low budget. That's because people will always give him a little bit of money to make films so that he can keep on making films. And also he feels safer if he's got a limit to work within.
Yes.
Very six.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that Tom Hanks is worth sort of to think in terms of other examples behaviourally. the character of Saving Private Ryan that he plays, there's something for sixes around home which has a sort of sensitivity, a charge. It's a sort of there's almost a yearning to be home, whatever that is. It can take the form of our actual home. So home can be a very precious, very sacred place. But and in the film, there's that thing about actually all I want to do is go home. That was really what he was going to do, was go home. But of course, he also felt that then there's that other part which comes, which is the duty. So the sixth quality also has a sense of duty to, well, okay, I'm responsible, but really I'd rather have just gone home. But I will do this. Of course, ultimately, what's our real home?
Well, maybe we can now step up a gear in terms of the overview, which is also very much part of the Enneagram, and seeing our potential to move beyond the neurotic side and the conditioning ego side to, as I say, our potential, more of an alignment with who we truly are. So do you want to talk, one of you, a little bit about how you see in your own process, you moving towards that alignment?
Yes, I certainly began to truly acknowledge for myself the gifts that I had. Which sixes have real difficulty in acknowledge their gifts. They have difficulty with success. If you're successful, you're going to be out there and visible. So it makes sense within the sixth style to have difficulty with success, and so part of that is a difficulty with actually recognizing what your true gifts are. I began to recognise, and it was brought home to me in life, that my intuition was a real gift to me, and that I hadn't followed it, that I had followed other people's advice instead, that I'd had very strong intuitions, and then other people had said something, and I took myself off my own path. So to really and truly get in touch with, that's one of the gifts of the mind. I fell in love with my mind. I fell in love with the aspect of my higher mind, which was informing me, but which, because I kept doubting it, I wasn't listening to. And when I began to fall in love with my mind, truly, instead of just playing about in it, then I began to access greater self-wisdom.
And what form did that self-wisdom take?
It might be in very small ways. So I'd have kind of precognitions about things. I did psychic development for quite a while, and I began to take notice of them. And then I'd think, oh, actually, yes, I had some presentiment about that. I began to listen to my intuitions about other people. Without hanging on to them too much, without dissecting them and analysing them, I began to listen to the clues and the intuitions that came to me, say in relation to somebody else. And I came to realise that in fact there was a me that was talking to me all the time, that if I settled down inside myself and listened to, had some really good wise words to tell me. But I needed to practice and continue to need to practice that settling of anxiety or overthinking or overanalyzing, to allow that to come through.
Yeah, so it comes down to really, we're saying near the beginning, understanding yourself more.
Yes.
When you understood yourself more, things could settle down. Yeah.
Yes. And to get that sense of, it's a bit like we've made a cake of ourselves and we've over-egged it, or we've put in a bit too much of this or a bit too much of that, and to begin to get a feel for which ingredients have I just added a bit too much to. I'm a bit too salty now, or I'm a bit too acid now, or oh boy, that was sweet. To get the flavour of yourself. And really get a lived experience of how is that working now? Okay. Right in this minute, how is that at work? And to catch oneself. Self-awareness is everything.
Okay. And you, Grahame, how is it for you to go on this journey of your potential?
Picking up from what Judith was referring to about the success, one of the characteristics of sixes is to have this amnesia of success, forgetting the things that actually went right in my life. and only concentrating on them and fixating on those things that have maybe gone wrong, like the criticisms, or maybe I was in feedback forms that come from some of the workshops. Out of sort of 8 people, 7 people give a lovely glowing report, they loved it, and then one person makes one little comment, which may not even be a criticism, but just something they didn't particularly find sat with them. And that's the bit that will sort of niggle and stay with me, and I overthink and think about it and chew it over and obsess about it. That sort of certainly happens a little bit more. I catch myself in the act, but the potential part is the awakeness of that clarity, of just being able to let go of that and stay in this sort of present moment. I mean, I mentioned earlier about the physical connection, and this trusting in myself. Some of the things that I've kind of started to do, which I've always enjoyed of others, like art, writing, and believing in myself that these things have a place. They might not be magnificent, but they are worthy of putting out, worthy of showing, without feeling any criticism or judgment from them. That's the potential, to not have that sense of I always have to justify what I've done, what I'm doing, and just be who is here, that be myself, be whatever this sort of spirit, this soul that is manifest here in the world, and allow that to blossom.
Okay. Lynne, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Well, a little bit different perspective for me, because when I first understood the number 6, the point 6,
Yes. Yeah.
I saw it as a template, a blueprint. And I looked around the room and I saw other people who were also 6s and how it fitted on them. And as I was driving home that night, I saw how it fitted for me, and it was who I used to think I was. I used to think that template was Lynne, and when I saw that other people had exactly the same template, I was then able to ask, then if everybody has that who is a 6, then that's not Lynne, and who is Lynne, and who am I really? And it was a moment of profound awakening for me, because I saw that I was not the 6, then who was I really? And it took me to the essence.
And what did it feel like to go to the essence?
Tremendous freedom.
Tremendous
And
freedom. Wow.
Freedom,
Yeah.
liberation, peace, joy, excitement, bliss, happiness, relief.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
was
And
great.
are you able to still have that reference point in your day-to-day life?
Absolutely. Always with me.
It's always with you.
Always with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful. It's been a tremendous tool for me.
That quality of realization of awakeness is something that 6s, when they get it, they really get it. And it's discriminating between the quality of alertness. The alertness can be more that kind of fear-based, which would be, I don't know how many people here have, if you've walked along an alleyway and you hear steps and there's that kind of, I'm keeping an eye, I've got to keep an eye out. That's a kind of an alertness, that's more the fear-based. But an awakeness, just to be awake, I'm here, I notice, without having any kind of judgments around it, without having any fear around it. That quality of is available to all people, to all human beings, as a high quality of the 6 of us all offers us, just like every other type has a high quality. They're all available to us. For 6s, when we get that, it's a kind of real, I'm here, I am the awakeness.
It seems like there's almost 2 levels of value here. There's the value of recognition of the patterns, neurotic patterns, the programming, and seeing that how that doesn't always serve us for the best, and seeing that we can approach things in a different way because our understanding has deepened. And there's also what you've touched on, quite beautifully, quite dramatically, is sometimes something really quantum can happen when you see the template there, see that it is just a template and there's something else that's the real you. That's big stuff, isn't it?
Big stuff.
Yeah, and you kind of get beyond the mind, you get beyond, well, I can be a bit less fearful because I understand the dynamics too. There is something else there.
And the personality then becomes the vehicle of who you are. So instead of being, I am a personality and the real me exists somewhere else, there is the core self, there is who I am, and I have a personality, and my personality can then become much more open and porous, if you like. The soul can shine through my personality. And so my experience was that those aspects of 6 which were constraining, limiting, tight, if you like, that the space inside had got a bit too tight, became aspects of my personality which became a gift. For example, questioning. Questioning, there's a real gift in doubt. Doubt allows you, and questioning allows you to explore. There's a great curiosity, a childlike curiosity. I mean, if you think of a tree and you've got, here we're investigating this tree, a 6 is quite happy to go right to the end of a twig. They'll follow that thought right to that tip of that twig, wherever it's going, whether it's going in a positive or a negative direction, because they want to kind of know. There's this intense curiosity. And then when they get to the end of that twig, they think, okay, found that one, right, I'll do another one. So there's a great freeing up of the joy of question. There's a joy in searching. There's a joy of being curious. So it stops being a questioning because I need to feel secure and safe, and starts being, oh, let's find out what's here.
So there, in a way, there is a value in what we could call the negative traits,
Yeah.
but it is maximising that value somehow.
It's transforming it.
Transforming the value. Good.
Yeah, I think that it's always important, people watching this programme, they're listening to this, I would always offer to anybody that comes and prepared to listen to me gabble on about the Enneagram, don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for anything. In fact, I wouldn't recommend anyone believe anything until we can actually prove it for ourselves, to actually experience it. Now, for 6, that comes as a natural, oh, right, okay, I can doubt this stuff. But it's difference between doubting it and then going and looking under the books to support my doubt. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about it? I mean, that's one of the characteristics of 6, is to kind of go around and ask everyone, what's the right thing to do? To store all that, and then to go back and kind of use them as references, which of course we know it's not going to, no one's going to agree with each other, which leads to that kind of confusion. There's a difference between that and saying, okay, that's an interesting point. Let me see if I can prove it in terms of like a good scientist, as a good sort of Sherlock Holmes would do. Let's test it out, observe it in myself. Then when I find something which is of a truth for me, that's then where the courage comes to trust that. Because the next step would be the 6 personality to come back in and say, well, hang on, I've had that experience, I've had that. I'll just try and check that out with my guru or with someone else to see if that's actually verifiable. That shift is the single little shift to catch away from myself, from trusting my own experience. And it is only my experience. It doesn't have to be everyone else's experience. That's the other part, not become the kind of, oh, this is the way and this is the only way. But and when 6 is going to get that, they can be an incredible inspiration to people to say, well, actually, what's your truth?
Yeah, it's interesting because I know one of the ways the 6 is classified is the questioner. That's, I know, I think it's this Enneagram Made Simple book. It's the questioner, the title they give it. And I've always been a questioner. I know in business, one thing I always do, and I've done reasonably well in business, is that when we have a new project, my type 6 always goes to well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Now, not because that is the only scenario, because that is actually quite a good starting point when you look at a whole new project. If the worst thing happens, is it going to bring the whole company down? No, if it's not, we can go up a stage, and then so you're looking at something from a very grounded point of view, i.e. you've looked at the downside. And many people in business in the world, they go racing ahead, they haven't really checked out the potential downside, and they get in a mess. And so there's certain things about the 6 for me, there's something very sensible and intelligent sometimes about it, and it's the excess which kind of can bring us down if we haven't got that understanding and awareness.
And all our type structures seem intelligent to us, and they centred around a way we compensated for that with which we had lost touch, and so they were sensible. They were intelligent ways. If you feel that you're unsupported and you can't trust the world, then why not be frightened? It's very logical, and yet the problem was that became an overcompensation, and it becomes the reality, and so we begin to get so constricted into that particular view. And it becomes an overdoing, and of course then we're out of touch with the other possibility that actually the world and the universe and people and our environment and us will always be there to support us. They are of themselves supporting, and so it becomes very binary. Oh, I'll choose this reality, and that means I'm not choosing that one.
For people listening to this, and they hear us talking a lot about fear and doubt and anxiety and courage, one of the things I learned through identifying all that in myself was the antidote for all of that, which is faith. For me, some people call it trust. I like to call it faith more recently, and that brings me tremendous peace, and and has helped me calm myself. And
so what does faith actually mean for you, Lynne?
Very good question. Very interesting question, which is what a 6 would say. What does faith mean for me? Well, that there is something much bigger than myself, much greater, and that my little pinprick of fear of anxiety is only that.
So it shows you the bigger perspective somehow.
There's a bigger picture, and the bigger picture is good.
Okay.
I think that's actually a very nice description of another aspect. Most 6s will recognise that there is, and actually feel a great grace, joy in being part of something bigger than ourselves. I think that's the ego version, is the kind of allegiance or rebellion against the authoritative aspect, the kind of structure of sort of thinking I have to be, who can I trust? Whereas that whole idea of actually we're all one, we're part of that, and that's the honour, certainly speaks to me. I think the other thing I just wanted to sort of pick up on that you were saying about think of the worst thing can happen, and I know it's not just 6s that do that, but for me that's a kind of a 6 mental strategy that becomes one of the personality strategies that is always used. Now, I think for anybody watching this who is maybe doing coaching, life coaching, this is the value of understanding the Enneagram and the different types, because when we have a sense of what's the normal default strategy of the personality structure, we know the one not to use. It's like you'll see throughout the series that your different people are going to have different types, will have different strategies. You'll have seen it with the 3 earlier, of the kind of having an outcome, always having a goal. That can be very useful for a 6, actually. It can be part of the antidote, because the 6 is always in that away from, I don't want this, I don't want that. It's like being sent to the supermarket with a list of all the foods you don't want to eat. And so what do you come back with? You don't know. That's part of the problem. So to actually move to having a goal is useful. Now, equally, that strategy you mentioned of think of the worst thing that can happen and where are we? And there's a whole series that Dale Carnegie did in his kind of How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, built many years ago. It's very valuable. But if you actually gave that to a 6, actually all that's happening is we're giving that structure the very thing which takes us more and more deeper into the personality. So it's kind of the one strategy that I wouldn't recommend someone use as a coaching strategy for 6, because that's already happening. That's the kind of default mechanism. And if we can get clear on that, any sort of assistance we're giving to friends, advice, if we have a sense of that, that would be one to say, okay, we know you're doing that already, and you probably do that really well all the time. So let's look at something else.
Yeah, I think the example I was trying to give was, for me anyway, it was the way of actually ending up doing something that that was new and creative, and maybe had a risk element by looking at the possible downside. But the thing I'd like to, in the last 5 minutes or so, is really look at is you introduced the type 6,
Yes.
and you were talking about this lack of holding
Yes.
when we were very young.
Yes.
And of course that brings on to what you mentioned, trust and basic trust. And that is very much, I think, part of the progression of the 6 towards potential, is this basic trust, isn't it? And I
Yes,
just wonder how that's manifested in your life.
Okay, so Lynne put faith beautifully, actually, and what I would say about faith is first of all to distinguish it from belief. And belief is, somebody teaching you something, or somebody saying this is how it is, and you say yes, okay, I believe it. Faith is a gnosis. Faith is an experience inside that you describe. Faith is that experience of self, of something which is known. It is really grounded in something very solid, very real. It is an aspect of reality, faith. I was pondering faith actually yesterday, and I was reminded of when I was a little girl. And I was a little girl who had a great deal of faith actually, and I remember going to church and the vicar saying, believe in God, and being completely baffled. It was like saying to me, believe in your mother. Well, of course, she's standing next to me. Why do I need to believe in her? I already had that. They were telling me something which I knew, because as a child I was close to it. On my journey, I kind of left it behind, in some sense. That is what faith brings back. It brings back to you that experience inside yourself of the greater reality of who you are. We are not just our personality. I am not my body. I am not my thoughts. I am not my emotions. I am more than all of those.
And you know
And
that.
you know it.
It's not that you believe it.
It's not that you believe
know
it. You know it.
Yeah.
You have a real experience of knowing that there is a constant.
Yeah.
There is a constant, eternal self, essence. So whatever one's frame of terminology might be, that means whatever it means to the people watching this, but there is something which remains always. And that is both in me and greater than me. And it's that connection that you described so beautifully, that connection with that. And that experience, for me, really, it was like I remembered. I remembered who I was. And day-to-day life is about continuing to remember that. Remember who you are. That's right. You remember that. Be that.
So you did somewhere already know,
Yeah.
but you'd forgotten. So
I'd forgotten.
it was like rediscovering, remembering.
Or in
It's very
Enneagram
important,
terms,
yeah.
I fell asleep. I fell asleep to it.
Okay. Well, good. We've almost got to the end of our little journey here for 50 minutes on the Enneagram. I just wanted to just plug some books that have been helpful for me, and they're, you might want to recommend some books yourselves, but this one, Enneagram Made Easy, which is very basic, but it's a really good starting point if you know nothing about the Enneagram. And then there's the Spiritual Dimension of the Enneagram by Sandra Maitrey, which really widens the picture, and I found that very, very interesting. And I think probably this is quite advanced in its own way, but Facets of Unity by A.H. Almaas, really towards the end of the program we were getting into the depth. This is probably describes the depth very, very well. But of course, at the end of the day, it is down, as you've so rightly said, down to what we truly experience. Otherwise, it's just another idea, isn't it? Is there any books quickly that you guys would recommend?
I would recommend 2 websites from my training,
Yes.
which is Helen Palmer and David Daniels, which is Enneagram Worldwide, and the other one is Enneagram.com, which is Helen's website, and Enneagram Worldwide is of the whole school that I was taught in, and
Right.
it has a wealth of information on
Okay,
there.
wonderful. So Judith, Grahame and Lynne, thank you very much for coming along and joining Conscious TV this afternoon. And really hope you found it useful. I've certainly very much enjoyed it. I was able to really participate in this as it's my type 6. And we'll be covering the other 7 types. We've already done type 3, the achiever, other 7 types over the coming months. And if indeed you live in England and can get to London and you'd like to be in one of these programs and you do feel the Enneagram has been valuable in your life, then get in touch with us and maybe we meet you actually on the settee here at the Conscious TV studio. Thank you for watching us, and I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.